The first time I saw the bulldozers roll in, I thought it was just another county project, maybe road work, maybe survey crews. But then the signs went up. Future site of Golden Horizon Villas, an exclusive HOA community. It wasn't just land to me. Those 1,000 acres were my family's legacy. My grandfather had worked every inch of it, raising cattle, planting groves, and building irrigation channels that kept the valley alive. When he passed, the land fell into my hands, not as wealth, but as responsibility. I wasn't rich. I wasn't powerful. But that valley had been home for generations, and I had vowed never to sell it off. The HOA didn't care. They came with slick-talking lawyers and polished real estate agents, dangling contracts in front of me. They claimed they'd beautify the valley with luxury villas, a golf course, and artificial lakes. They promised jobs, infrastructure, and progress. I said no over and over. But refusing an HOA is like stepping on a nest of hornets. They filed zoning appeals, pressured the county board, and even spread lies that my ranch violated environmental codes. I woke up one morning to find fences cut, cattle spooked, and survey stakes driven into the soil, as if my refusal meant nothing. Then came the day I stood on the ridge and watched the machines grind up the old orchard. Trees that had stood for half a century were snapped like twigs. They didn't care that the land was still under dispute. They claimed eminent domain would eventually force my hand. Neighbors whispered that fighting them was pointless. HOAs always won. But they didn't know the land the way I did. They didn't know about the dam. My grandfather and his brothers had built it during the drought of '52. A modest structure by modern standards, but strong, reinforced stone, hidden sluices, and an overflow system designed to protect the valley. It sat upstream, quiet, unnoticed, feeding water to the fields through channels only I remembered. For years I'd maintained it alone, patching cracks, oiling gates, making sure the reservoir stayed balanced. To the HOA, it was invisible. They saw only land to bulldoze and foundations to pour. But as I watched them strip away the last of the grassland, leaving nothing but raw clay and half-finished villas, something inside me hardened. They thought they could erase my family's legacy with paperwork and steel. They thought I was powerless. They were wrong. The reservoir wasn't full, at least not at first. The summer had been dry, but storms were forecast, and when rain comes to the valley, it comes hard. The water level crept up day by day, feeding into the dam I knew better than my own reflection. From the ridge, I could see the HOA's construction site. Half-built villas stood like skeletons, concrete still curing in the sun. They had cut deep into the earth for basements and underground parking, never once considering the soil composition. The valley clay, when wet, didn't drain. It swallowed. The HOA board strutted about in tailored suits and shiny shoes, bragging about Phase 1 completion. Investors toured the grounds, imagining the glittering paradise they'd sell for millions. They toasted champagne as if the land was already theirs, but I knew something they didn't. I knew the valley's secret. Every dam has its pressure point. Every sluice has its threshold. And when you open the gates, gravity does the rest. My grandfather used to say, "Water remembers. It always takes back what's stolen." I walked the length of the dam in the rain one evening, lantern in hand, boots sinking into the mud. I checked the levers, the release valves, the floodgates. The storm above roared like a drum. My hands shook as I gripped the wheel that controlled the main sluice. Once I turned it, there'd be no going back. I thought of the old orchard they'd destroyed, the cattle they'd scared off, the lies they'd filed in court to paint me as some stubborn recluse. I thought of my grandfather's calloused hands guiding mine when I was a boy, teaching me how the valley lived and breathed. I thought of the HOA president laughing when I begged them to stop, telling me, "You can't." Right progress, my jaw tightened. My hands steadied. The first half-turn of the wheel let out a hiss like a snake. Water surged against the steel, pushing, eager. Another turn, and the sluice groaned, shuddering as the reservoir's weight demanded release. And then, with one final push, the gates opened. What came next wasn't a rush, it was a roar. A wall of muddy, foaming water shot out, racing down the channel like a beast unchained. The valley trembled. I followed with my lantern, watching the torrent snake its way downhill, unstoppable, inevitable, toward the villas, toward the people, who thought the land would bow to them. The flood came at night. Down in the valley, workers scrambled, headlights cutting through sheets of rain. Someone shouted as the first surge hit. A brown wave tearing through unfinished streets, ripping up paving stones like scraps of paper. Water filled the half-built basements in minutes, swallowing steel beams and fresh concrete. By dawn, the HOA's dream community was a swamp. Villas leaned sideways, walls buckled, foundations gone. Heavy equipment sat half-buried, cranes toppled like toys. What had been billed as the future of luxury living was now nothing but mud, silence, and shattered pride. News crews arrived. Reporters waded ankle-deep, narrating the disaster. Insurance assessors shook their heads, muttering about acts of God and unforeseen water damage. But I knew better. The HOA tried to spin it. They called it a freak storm, a geological anomaly. But engineers who surveyed the wreckage pointed upstream. They found the old dam, the open sluice, the evidence plain as day. The county launched an investigation, but the truth was harder to bury than concrete. Every file, every lawsuit, every dirty tactic the HOA had used against me came crawling back into the light. Neighbors, who had once told me to give up now, nodded in quiet respect. They knew I hadn't destroyed the land. I'd saved it from being destroyed forever. The HOA dissolved within months, bankrupt from lawsuits and abandoned by investors. The valley, scarred but alive, began to heal. Grass returned. Birds nested again in the reeds near the reservoir. I stood one last time at the dam, lantern in hand, just as my grandfather once had. The water was calm again, reflecting the sky. Like glass, progress, they'd called it. But progress doesn't come from tearing down roots and paving over history. Sometimes progress means standing firm, holding the line, reminding the world that land remembers, water remembers, and families remember. The HOA thought they could erase me. Instead, the flood erased them. And in the silence that followed, the valley was mine again.